Alrighty folks, let's fix our data table a little bit. So we added a new variable inside the item info structure, which means we need to go into the data table and assign all of them to the appropriate one. Now this is the second time I've recorded this video, so I tried to go back, but it's already saved the progress. So what I did is I went down very to the bottom where I had the item ID, and I just selected the appropriate item ID from the drop down. So there, you just go through and set all the ones that you want craftable. Don't forget to also tick this boolean for the ones that you want craftable. So for instance, the health potion, craftable. I set its recipe because I have the items to do its recipe. The level required for this one will be just 1, and then the crafting experience, however much crafting experience you want them to get from it. Mana potion, level required 1, mana crafting XP, we'll do 5 also on that one. Rusted sword is craftable. I don't have the reagents put into my data table just yet to be able to put the recipe in, but that'll be fine for now. So I'll set its level required is 2, so that when my character hits crafting level 2, then that will pop up. Iron sword is craftable, level 4, 10 XP, and so on and so forth for every item in your data table that you want crafted. Alright, so once that's done, let's set up the HUD notify. So I've gone into the player HUD widget where we have the health bar and all that jazz. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a canvas panel to my canvas panel. I'm going to anchor it to the far right in the middle, reset its positions back to 0. Well, on the X it'll be 10 actually. For the Y alignment, I'm going to set it to 0.5 so that when I stretch this way, it stays right in the middle. Now the size X is going to be 150, and I want it just off the side of the screen, because this is going to fade in and move in and display all the items that they learned when they leveled up, and then it'll slide off the screen to the top. So once this is done, I'm going to add an image to it that I anchor to the full screen. I'm going to make its tint, I'm going to make it black, and make it on the alpha 0.75 so that it's somewhat see-through, just like all our others. So then I will add a text to the canvas panel, highlight it, and I'm going to anchor it to the top middle. Position X is 0 and the alignment is 0.5. Now for the Y, I'm going to move it negative, let's see, negative 40 is probably looking good. And then down here on the justification, I'm going to align it center so that it's right there, just like there. So I'm going to type, I want this to say new recipes, like that. Maybe align left. No. I'll just move the whole thing further over. So we'll go, instead of position X being 10, it'll be 25. 25 gets it. Now I'm going to set the color and opacity. That nice blue. I like it. Typeface will be italic. Just to add a little pizzazz. So now I want to add what is it I want to add now? Scroll box. It's a scroll box. Alright, I will add the scroll box to the canvas panel and anchor it to the full thing. And boom. Alright, and then the last thing I want is a uniform grid panel that will go right onto that scroll box. Now this is going to be our learned items list, and it will be a variable. Now for its horizontal and vertical alignment, I'm going to horizontally align it to the entire thing so that it's all the way across, and for the vertical it's just going to be to the top, so that when we add a button in here it'll just fill up as it goes and it won't stretch too crappily. I don't know what other better word there would be for that that's appropriate, but alright, anyway. Alright, so over here in the bottom left we need to set up the animation so that this can actually slide out and then slide up. So let's click animation, and this will be, we'll just call it learning for now. So I'm going to click the learning. When you click an animation over here, it'll shift your timeline and you can adjust the parameters of that animation. So after I've clicked that and I've got all my timeline stuff over here, I'm going to click the canvas panel in my hierarchy so that when I click this plus track, I can easily find it. Now you can go through the all named widgets and then scroll through to the one you want, but highlighting it and then going for the top selection is much quicker. So there are two things I want it to do. So I want it to go from invisible to visible, and I want it to slide. So I need to add two tracks, one being a render opacity, which is how the engine will render it. So just like that, it's 0 is invisible, 1 visible. First things first, playback options right here, this little arrow that looks like the play key. We need to determine the length of our animation. So mine's going to be 4 seconds. You'll notice it already had a 5 there, but this red line wasn't here, so it was just not doing like it was supposed to. Anywho, so I'm going to stretch this end of, well, I guess we could just do that because that apparently needed to be done anyway. So you can just grab that and then stretch it. So hooray. Alright, so the render opacity I'm going to set to 0. Now I'm going to add one more track, and this is going to be the transform. Just like with characters or objects in the world, this can have a transform and we can move it or rotate it or scale it or shear. Oh. Well, that's cool. Or we can do that. So I'm going to stretch this all the way over here. Now you notice that there's already a bunch of dots for it. That's fine. That's perfectly okay. Now on the translation is its screen space. So it's got its X coordinate and Y coordinate. Doesn't need a Z because it's just 2D. And these are those dimensions. Yeah, that was almost bad the way I was about to say it. But alright, so once we got our keyframes at the beginning, which these are the little keyframe icons. If you have it on the timeline where you want to adjust the parameters, you get the parameters where you want them, and then you can click this and you can adjust each thing individually. I'm going to go to the 0.5 second mark. I'm going to set the render opacity to 1, and now you'll see it'll fade in and out over that timeline. But I also want it to move left. So taking into consideration the space it is off from the side, which I think I've made it 25 units, and the size on the X, which is 150, it has to move at least 175 to be in line with this. I want it to move a little bit further, so we're going to go 185. Now it's moving left, so I'm going to go negative 185. And then you'll see now it's fading in and moving left at the same time. Now we haven't adjusted the Y coordinate, but since we're going to be moving it up later, we do need to set that at this point it remains at the 0. So I'm going to move over here to the 2 second mark, and I'm just going to click all 3 of those keyframe marks so that during this time it maintains its position, so the player has enough time to read everything. It might need to come a little bit further over, so let's try negative 200. 200 looks good. Now you will have to adjust the other one also, but that's looking pretty good now. Alright, and then from here I want it to slide up and off the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to where I want it to end at the 4 second mark, and I am just going to move this way up. Let's see, negative 800 is probably good. Let's make sure that's off this. Yeah. And for the render opacity, I'm going to set it back to 0. And for the x coordinate, we don't need to really worry about it, but just to make sure everything's in line and streamlined, I'm going to add a keyframe. Alright, so if we drag it back to the beginning, now we can click this play button and see how our little effects will look. It's a little slow getting off the screen. Let's try moving the Y to the 3-second mark. And we can move them all to the 3-second mark. And then set my end to 3 seconds. 3 seconds. Oh, it's because, okay. You gotta drag these back too if you. Alright. 305. That's not what I said. 3 seconds. Go. Go, go, go. There it goes. Alright, now to the front. We'll check it one more time. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I like it. Alright, so all of those parameters are only adjusted when this is highlighted. So once I click right here, you'll see it snaps back into its position and we can adjust it where we want its baseline to be. So this only applies to the animation. Nope. This applies to everything else. So I'm going to highlight the canvas panel and I'm going to set its render opacity to default to 0. So now it'll be just like that and then just like that. But now we need to actually fill that learned items list with our information. So I'm going to go into the event graph. I'm going to create a custom event called learned items. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my player reference. I'm going to get learned items. And then for each element inside of that array, not array, I want to create a widget. Now for this I'm just going to be using the rewards panel again. It's getting a lot of use. Oh, actually from the loop body we need to get data table row. Data table being our item info. From the array element it'll be enum to string and then string to name. Now it does have an enum to name, but that will cause some issues. But let's see, for this create widget, let's add our reward panel icon. I'm going to set the item info inside of it to what it finds at that row. Then I'm going to grab my learned items list and add child to uniform grid, the child being the rewards panel icon. Now the row is left to right and the column, no, that's not right. The column is left to right and the row is up top to bottom. So it'll always be in column 0, but we want to update the row, so I'm going to promote it to a variable called L row, learned row. Then after that, we will increment it. And now we can go back to the beginning. Now that we have this L row integer, we can set it to 0 so that every time it calls this, everything else, it'll restart at the beginning and we can clear our learned items list. So I'm going to clear children. Just like that. That's looking great. Fantabulous. Alright, so now what we want to do is, let's see. For my learned items list, I'm going to set its slot padding to about 10. 10 on all of them. 10 everywhere. Everybody gets a 10. Alright, so now what we want to do is here in our learn recipes, once we Get out of here. I don't need you no more. You've served your purpose. Get going. You know what? As have you. Can move that back. Right here, after we're setting our learned items, we can get a reference to our HUD, our player reference, HUD reference. Get that, and then we need to type in learning so we can get that animation, and then we are just going to play animation. Now the animation needs to be plugged into the in animation, and the HUD reference needs to go into the target. So we'll plug this just like that. So now when our character crafts enough stuff to level up, which, hang on, let me put my 2 command back. So 2 key, gain craft experience, and we'll say 10 a pop. It's not adding. Oh, I bet I know what I did. Player HUD in the graph, and I bet I forgot. No, I did. Add child to uniform grid, rewards panel, item info. Because I'm only playing the animation, and I'm not telling it to play the learned thingy. So from the HUD reference, let's do learned items. We'll call that function so that it actually populates that widget for the animation. Now let's take a look. And now I learned 2 new recipes. Hooray! And now if I level up again, I learned a new recipe. That bar is a little bit too big, but it's looking good so far. Let's see. How big are those reward panel widgets? It's that one. Let's see. Quest C stop. Reward panel. These are 75 by 75, so it's double. Okay. So what I'm gonna do instead of stretching it to the whole thing, I'm gonna center align it so it'll be just right down the middle. It'll have a nice little buffer on both sides. Should at least. This is in theory. Let's check and see. That looks nice. That looks alright. But yeah, so now we're learning those recipes. There is nothing in my crafting list. What is going on there? What in the world? Okay, I seem to have found the error. So all I did was I went into the crafting screen widget itself that held the buttons, and I had to, well, let me just show you exactly what I did. So right here on our event construct for the crafting screen widget, after we casted the player and we do a for each loop for each of the crafting elements, then I had to replace that data table, that get data table row node. So I'm guessing that when we updated this, when we updated the structure, it threw everything into a tissy. So enum to string, string back to name, row found into the branch, plug the out row into this break, and then this into both sides of that item info. So now when I jump back in and I learn my recipes, I even cleared the crafting list and everything. So now, yeah, they're all there. So now I'm learning my recipes as we should, as it does. Let's see. And we'll fix the rest of the HUD elements in the next one. But there is your new fancy recipes alert. And in the next one, we will put an icon on screen so that when you craft something, it'll actually pop up and say crafted a potion. So I will see y'all in a bit. Bye-bye.